The Israeli mafia Hebrew letter Mem, Hebrew letter Aleph, Hebrew letter P, Hebrew letter Yod, Hebrew letter He, Hebrew letter Yod, Hebrew letter Shin, Hebrew letter Resh, Hebrew letter Aleph, Hebrew letter Lamed, Hebrew letter Yod, Hebrew letter Tav, Romanized, Mafia Yisraelit, or Hebrew letter Aleph, Hebrew letter Resh, Hebrew letter Gimel, Hebrew letter Vav, Hebrew letter Nun, Hebrew letter Yod, Hebrew letter P, Hebrew letter Shin, Hebrew letter Ayin, Hebrew letter Bet, Hebrew letter Yod, Hebrew letter Shin, Hebrew letter Resh, Hebrew letter Aleph, Hebrew letter Lamed. Ergahuni Pesha Israel. Organized crime in Israel is the organized crime groups operating in Israel. There are 16 crime families operating in Israel, 5 major groups active on the national level, and 11 smaller organizations. There are 6 Maghrebi Jewish crime families active and 3 Arab crime families. Many heads and members of the crime groups have either been killed or are in prison. Organized crime in Israel. The major crime groups are the Abergil, the Abutbals, the Alperons, the Dumranis, the Shirazis, the Amir Malner and Ziv Rosenstein syndicates. The illegal activities they are engaged in include operating casinos and other forms of gambling inside and outside Israel, car theft, prostitution, human trafficking, money laundering, murder, protection and extortion rackets, loan sharking and drug dealing. According to Israel's former police commissioner David Cohen, Israeli crime organizations have penetrated the formal economic sector and local governments, and equipped themselves with large quantities of combat means, explosives and arms. In a mob war starting in the early 2000s between the crime families, several crime bosses were killed. It also cost the lives of innocent bystanders. The IQB is the Israeli Special Police Unit that fights organized crime. In Israeli politics in 2010, it was reported by WikiLeaks that the United States Embassy in Israel expressed grave concern that Inbal Gavrieli, the niece of one of Israel's most powerful mafia families, had been elected to the Knesset as an MK for the Likud party. North African and Middle Eastern crime families. The immigration of Egyptian and Moroccan Jews to Israel and their settlement in the more impoverished neighborhoods led to the creation of crime families among Maghrebi Jews. This is evident in the fact that a large number of Israeli organized criminals have fled to Morocco in recent years. Israeli crime families of Moroccan Jewish descent expanded their operations to Europe and the USA, especially with their involvement in drug trafficking. Some of Israel's more well-known crime families are of North African and Middle Eastern Jewish descent. The Abergil crime family as well as the Abutbul and Damrani clans are originally from Morocco, the Alperon clan came from Egypt, and the Shirazi clan from Iran. Israeli Arab organized crime groups were formed in Israel. Some Arab-majority cities and towns are home to local crime families. Clans like Tayai-based Abdelkader family are involved in extortion, drug and weapon trafficking, fraud as well as money laundering, often in cooperation with their Jewish counterparts. One Arab crime family, the Jaroushi family from Ramla, is one of the most powerful crime families in Israel. Another example was the criminal gang around Musa Aliyan in New York City, whose main business was the importation of heroin. Russian Mafia. The Russian Mafia in Israel began with the mass immigration of Russian Jews to Israel in 1989. Jewish Russian crime bosses such as Samayin Mogilevich acquired Israeli citizenship and laundered money through Israel. The Russian Mafia saw Israel as an ideal place to launder money, as Israel's banking system was designed to encourage Aliyah, the immigration of Jews, and the accompanying capital. Following the trend of global financial deregulation, Israel had also implemented legislation aimed at easing the movement of capital. Combined with the lack of anti-money laundering legislation, Russian organized crime found it an easy place to transfer ill-gotten gains. In 2005, police estimated that Russian organized crime had laundered between $5 and $10 billion in the 15 years since the end of the Soviet Union. Non-Jewish criminals such as Sergei Mikhailov sought to get Israeli passports, using fake Jewish documentation. Russian and Ukrainian Jewish criminals have also been able to set up networks in the United States, following the large migration of Russian Jews to New York City and Miami, but also in European cities such as Berlin and Antwerp. Russian Jewish mobsters include Marat Balagula, Evgeny Agrin and their respective criminal gangs in the United States. Soviet Jewish criminal groups in the United States are involved in racketeering, prostitution, drug trafficking, extortion, and gasoline fraud as well as murder. Georgian organized crime family-based organized crime groups were formed among Georgian Jewish immigrants to Israel as well. Georgian Jewish crime families have been able to expand their operations to Western European cities such as Antwerp. They are involved in counterfeiting, fraud, money laundering, drug trafficking, weapon trafficking, prostitution and armed robbery. Such was the case with the Georgian Jewish Melikov clan in Antwerp. In the United States in the 1980s, Israelis set up a crime syndicate headed by Johnny Atias in New York, dubbed the Israeli Mafia. It pulled off the biggest gold heist in the history of Manhattan's jewelry district, getting away with over $4 million in gold jewelry. Atias was murdered in January 1990, and New York's Israeli Mafia fell apart soon after. Several members, among them Ron Gonen, had turned informant and the authorities arrested the rest of the gang in September of that year. Israeli crime organizations such as the Abergil crime family and Ziv Rosenstein were heavily involved in ecstasy trafficking in the United States. In a statement before Congress in 2000, officials with the U.S. Customs Service noted that Israeli organized crime elements appeared to be in control of the multi-billion-dollar U.S. ecstasy trade, from production through the international smuggling phase. The main drug supplier of former Gambino crime family under boss Sammy Gravano in his Arizona drug ring allegedly was New York-based Israeli mobster Ilan Zargar, who allegedly distributed more than 1 million ecstasy pills from May 1999 to May 2000 with a wholesale value of $7 million. He pleaded guilty to charges of running a drug gang that flooded Arizona and New York with almost 4 million ecstasy pills over 3 years. Another Israeli, Oded Tuido, said to head one of the largest ecstasy smuggling organization, which imported millions of ecstasy pills from Paris, Brussels and Frankfurt into New York, Miami and Los Angeles, was arrested in May 2001. In 2006, Ziv Rosenstein was extradited to the U.S. after being arrested in Israel. He pleaded guilty before a federal court in Florida to charges that he distributed ecstasy pills and was sentenced to 12 years in prison, which he serves in Israel. In January 2011, Isaac Abergil and Meir Abergil and 3 other suspects were extradited to the U.S. They faced a 77-page, 32-count federal indictment that alleged murder, massive embezzlement, money laundering, racketeering and running a large Los Angeles-based ecstasy ring. In Mexico, Mexico was shocked when members of the Israeli Mafia killed Israeli citizens in broad daylight at a restaurant and a shopping mall in Mexico City on July 24, 2019. A 33-year-old woman, who was reportedly paid MXN $5,000 US $260, was arrested. Her alleged accomplice was arrested in Cancun, Quintana Roo, Mexico, on July 26. Notable members: Abergil crime family, top Moroccan Jewish criminal organization in Israel, involved mostly in drug trafficking and illegal gambling. Yaakov Alperon, head of the Egyptian Jewish Alperon crime family, until his car bombing assassination on November 17, 2008. Ludwig Feinberg. He was a crime figure in America with connections to the Medellin cartel and the Russian mafia, until he was arrested. Ziv Rosenstein. Formerly the top crime figure in Tel Aviv, until he was caught. He was heavily involved in drug trafficking, mostly ecstasy, and allegedly ran other criminal operations as well. See also Crime in Israel, Jewish American organized crime, Georgian Mafia, Romanian Mafia. References. External links: Gad J. Bensinger, Organized Crime in Israel. An Update, Part 1. Crime and Justice International Magazine. Archived from the original on November 9, 2011. Gad J. Bensinger. Organized Crime in Israel. An Update, Part 2. Crime and Justice International Magazine. Archived from the original on August 11, 2011. Ethan Brown, July 24, 2000. E-commerce. New York Magazine. p. 3. Douglas Century, August 3, 2009. Holy Land Gangland. Tablet Magazine. Isabel Kirshner, November 20, 2008. Shiva, Gangland Style, Behind Burly Guards and Security Cameras. The New York Times. Israel, a Promised Land for Organized Crime. WikiLeaks. May 15, 2009, released December 1, 2010.